AITA for kicking my sister and her newborn out because she keeps calling my dog dirty. When my sister called me a few months ago, telling me she needed a place to stay, I didn't even hesitate. She had just had a baby, and her situation was a little complicated. She had split from the baby's father, didn't have a stable place to live, and was feeling overwhelmed with being a new mom. I figured, no problem. I have a decent-sized home, and it's just me and my golden retriever, Max. I could help her get on her feet for a few months while she figured things out. Family helps family, right? I thought I was doing something good. What I didn't expect was how quickly it would turn into an absolute nightmare. The moment she stepped into my house, it was like she had some sort of radar locked onto Max. He came trotting up to her, tail wagging, because he's literally the friendliest, most affectionate dog on the planet. Before I could even introduce them, she recoiled and gave me this disgusted look. Ugh. You didn't tell me he was going to be inside all the time, she said, clutching her newborn closer to her chest like Max was some kind of rabid wolf. I laughed it off at first, thinking she was just tired or overwhelmed from the move. Yeah, he's an indoor dog, I told her, scratching Max behind his ears. But don't worry, he's super clean. I keep up with his grooming, and he's well trained. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything, but I could already feel the tension creeping in. That first week was a disaster. Every little thing Max did seemed to bother her. If he walked past the baby's bassinet, she'd tense up like he was about to pounce. If he lay on the couch, she'd make a show of grimacing and dusting off the cushions. And then the comments started. Dogs don't belong inside, especially near a newborn, she muttered as she wiped down the coffee table for the third time that day. He's covered in germs, you know. Babies are really fragile. I tried to be patient. I really did. I told her that Max was clean, that I bathed him regularly, that he was vaccinated and perfectly safe. I even agreed to keep him out of the nursery, which I thought was a more than reasonable compromise. But no. That wasn't enough. Every day, there was something else. If Max walked into the living room while she was there, she'd shoot me a pointed look and say, "Can you put him somewhere else? It makes me nervous when he's near the baby." If he sat near her on the floor, just chilling like he always does, she'd shift uncomfortably and say, "I don't want dog hair near the baby's things. Can you keep him in another room?" I reminded her, again, that this was his home. That he wasn't some wild animal she had to be afraid of. That he wasn't going anywhere. She didn't like that answer. It got worse. One night, I came home from work to find the entire living room smelling like disinfectant. The couch, Max's favorite spot, was damp, like she had sprayed it down with something. I asked her what was going on, and she just shrugged and said, "I had to disinfect everything. He's always lying on the furniture, and I don't want the baby exposed to all that bacteria." That was the moment I started to get really pissed off. Not just because she was treating Max like a disease-ridden pest, but because she was acting like she had the right to decide what was acceptable in my home. I told her to cut it out, that she needed to stop acting like Max was a health hazard, but she just rolled her eyes and said, "You wouldn't understand because you don't have a baby." The final straw came a few days later. I was in the kitchen when I heard Max let out a soft whimper. Not a yelp, not a bark, just a soft, confused sound, like he'd been startled. I walked into the living room just in time to see my sister shove him away with her foot, not hard, but definitely not gently either. He had been walking up to her, probably just sniffing around near the baby's playmat. He wasn't jumping. He wasn't barking. He was just existing, in his own home. And she kicked him. Something inside me snapped. I don't even remember exactly what I said, but I do know that I yelled. I asked her what the hell she thought she was doing, why she thought it was okay to put her hands, or feet, on my dog. She looked startled at first, then defensive. I didn't hurt him, she shot back, eyes wide like I was the unreasonable one. I just don't want him near the baby. I told her, very clearly, that if she had such a problem with Max, then she was free to find somewhere else to stay. That I had been more than accommodating, and I wasn't about to let her treat my dog like garbage just because she had some irrational fear of him. That's when the tears started. She accused me of caring more about a dog than her and her baby. She said I was being cold and heartless, that she was just trying to protect her child, that I was choosing a pet over my own family. I didn't budge. She packed up her things that night and left, crying as she slammed the door behind her. Now, my parents are furious with me. They think I should have been more understanding, that I should have made Max stay outside while she was here, that I should have prioritized my sister and my newborn niece over a dog. But here's the thing, Max is not just a dog. He's my family. He has never hurt anyone. He has never been aggressive. He has never given her a single reason to fear him, other than the fact that he exists. I was willing to compromise, to keep him out of the nursery, to be mindful of her comfort. But I was not willing to make him live like an outcast in his own home, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her treat him like trash. So, am I the asshole for choosing my dog over my sister? Because honestly, I don't feel like I am. Update 1. It didn't take long for my parents to start their campaign. At first, it was subtle, the kind of guilt-tripping that sneaks up on you in everyday conversations. My mom would call, her voice laced with disappointment, telling me how my sister was struggling, how she was exhausted all the time, how she barely had a moment to breathe with the baby keeping her up all night. She told me my sister had nowhere stable to go, that she was bouncing between friends' houses, that she was too embarrassed to ask anyone else for help. Then she would pause, letting the weight of it settle, waiting for me to step in and offer to fix it. She asked how I could turn my back on my own sister, how I could let my newborn niece go without a safe and stable place to live. She spoke like I had kicked them out onto the street, like I had slammed the door in their faces without a second thought. When I reminded her, again, that my sister had chosen to leave because I refused to banish Max from his own home, she brushed it off as if it was completely irrelevant. The details didn't matter to her. What mattered was that I had drawn a line in the sand, and to her, that was the real problem. Then came the pressure. Real pressure. One evening, my mom called again, and this time, her voice was thick with frustration, not just disappointment. There was an edge to it, something sharp beneath the surface that told me she was done playing the guilt game, she was moving into full-blown demand territory. She told me I needed to fix this. That I had to make things right. That my sister couldn't just figure it out on her own while taking care of a baby. She spoke as if this entire situation could be easily resolved if I just apologized, let my sister move back in, and agreed to keep Max away from them. She framed it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, as if I had been making an enormous deal out of nothing. Like I had blown everything out of proportion over a dog. I told her, calmly, that I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. That my sister had been the one making unreasonable demands. That I had been more than fair by keeping Max out of the nursery. That she had escalated things by treating him like he was some kind of disease-carrying menace and outright kicking him away when all he did was walk near her. I told my mother that if my sister wanted to come back, all she had to do was respect the fact that Max lived here. That wasn't what she wanted to hear. She scoffed, exasperated, and asked me why I was being so stubborn over an animal. Why I was refusing to do something so simple to help my sister. She said that if I just let Max stay outside while my sister was living with me, this entire thing could have been avoided. She made it sound like I was being impossibly difficult for no reason at all. When I told her, once again, that Max wasn't just a dog to me, she sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that told me she thought I was being ridiculous. Then she told me that if I wasn't going to be reasonable, then maybe my father should talk to me instead. That's when my dad got involved. But he didn't yell. He didn't scold. He didn't guilt-trip me like my mother had. Instead, he did something worse, he made it sound like I had wronged my sister. That I had done something to her instead of simply standing my ground. He told me it was my responsibility to understand my mistake. That I had been cruel to my own sister in her time of need. That I should be ashamed of how I had treated her when she was struggling as a new mother. That I needed to let her come back and do better this time. He spoke as if I had thrown her and the baby onto the street in the middle of the night. As if I had refused to help her at all. As if I hadn't already been more than accommodating until she started acting like she had the right to control my home. I told him that she was free to come back as long as she respected my home. That I was not going to make Max suffer in his own house just because my sister had decided she couldn't live with a dog. That it was her problem, not mine, if she couldn't handle that. He scoffed, the way he always did when he thought I was being immature, and said, "That dog is not more important than your own family." I told him, very calmly, he is my family. Update 2. After my parents realized I wasn't just going to cave to their guilt trips, my sister decided to take matters into her own hands. At first, she approached me with carefully constructed messages, each one dripping with regret and a kind of vulnerability designed to pull at my heartstrings. She painted herself as someone who had made an unfortunate mistake, someone who hadn't intended for things to escalate the way they had. She told me she was struggling, that she was exhausted, that every day felt like an uphill battle. She said she was living in a cramped space with a friend who barely tolerated the presence of a baby, a friend who hadn't signed up for a screaming newborn and who reminded her of that fact at every turn. She described nights spent rocking her baby to sleep in a too small room, nights where she would cry because she didn't know how she was going to keep going like this. She told me she never meant for things to get this bad, that she wished things had gone differently. She framed it as though she had just been doing what any good mother would do, as though her actions had never been about me or about Max, but about protecting her child. She said she understood that I loved my dog, that he was important to me, but that I needed to understand her side too. She was a mother now, and mothers had to prioritize their children above all else. That was just the way things were. She insisted that she hadn't been trying to hurt me, that she hadn't meant to offend me, but I had to see reason. She wasn't asking me to get rid of Max, she said, she was only asking for a little compromise, just enough to ensure the safety of her child. I read the message and set my phone down without replying. There was nothing to say. When I didn't respond the way she wanted, her tone shifted. The carefully measured regret vanished, replaced by something much colder. Her words became sharper, more pointed, laced with an undercurrent of resentment. She accused me of being heartless, of abandoning her when she had nowhere else to go, of choosing an animal over my own blood. She told me I needed to take a long, hard look at myself, because my actions said more about the kind of person I was than any words ever could. I don't know how you can live with yourself, knowing you chose a dog over me and my baby, she wrote. Isn't that a huge red flag about the kind of person you are? What does that say about your priorities? I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on me. This wasn't just guilt anymore. It was an outright attack on my character. She wanted me to feel like there was something wrong with me, like I was defective for not bending to her demands. She wanted me to doubt myself, to question whether I had made the right decision, to start believing that maybe I was the problem. I still didn't respond. The next morning, another message arrived. This time, she had rebranded herself as the victim. Gone was the anger, replaced by a narrative of betrayal and disappointment. She told me I didn't understand how hard this was, that I had no idea what it felt like to be a single mother with nowhere to turn, to have no safety net, no one to rely on when things got tough. She said she had always looked up to me, always thought I was the responsible one, the person who could be counted on, the one who would step up when the family needed help. She said she had trusted that I would be there for her, that when things got difficult, I would do what was right. And then she ended it with a simple, cutting sentence. I guess I was wrong. I turned off my notifications. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought that, eventually, she would accept that I wasn't going to give her the reaction she wanted. That she would move on. But she wasn't done. A few days later, my parents called again. This time, they weren't even pretending to have a conversation. There was no warmth in their voices, no attempt to ease into the discussion with carefully placed words. They weren't asking me to reconsider. They weren't trying to persuade me. They were telling me what was going to happen. You will let her come back, my mother said, her voice sharp and unwavering. This is not up for debate. She's your sister. I took a slow breath, gripping my phone tighter, feeling the frustration and exhaustion settle deep in my bones. I had heard this argument before, over and over, the same recycled guilt they had been throwing at me for weeks. It had lost its sting. It wasn't even surprising anymore. I answered them in the calmest voice I could manage. Then you let her move in with you. Silence. It stretched on long enough to confirm what I had already known deep down. They didn't want her living with them. They couldn't handle what they were asking me to take on. When my dad finally spoke, his voice was lower, gritted with annoyance. This isn't about us. It's about making sure you fix what you broke. And that was when I realized this wasn't just about my sister needing a place to stay. It wasn't about the baby. It wasn't even about Max anymore. It was about control. About obedience. About making sure I fell in line, about proving that I wasn't allowed to set boundaries if those boundaries inconvenienced the family. They didn't just want me to take her back. They wanted me to admit I was wrong. To learn my lesson. To be the one to crawl back and make things right, even though I had done nothing wrong. Update 3. The final showdown happened at a family dinner. My parents had insisted I come over to talk things through, claiming it was time to settle everything once and for all. I knew it was a trap before I even agreed. The way my mother's voice had wavered, the forced neutrality in my father's tone, it all reeked of an ambush disguised as a reconciliation. But against my better judgment, I went. Part of me still clung to the hope that, at the very least, we could put this to rest. That I could make them understand, if not agree, that I wasn't going to bend. The moment I walked into the dining room, I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't about closure. It was an intervention. My sister was already seated, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and expectation, like she was waiting for me to finally cave and say, "You're right. Come back." My mother sat beside her, her face drawn with carefully placed concern, already bracing for the emotional weight she intended to throw at me. My father leaned forward with that same disapproving stare he had always used when he thought I was being difficult. They had already made up their minds about how this was supposed to go. I sat down, feeling the tension coil around me like a vice, pressing in on my chest. The air was thick with expectation, a silent demand that I be the one to fold first. Then my father spoke, his voice measured but firm, like he was explaining something simple to a child who just refused to understand. He told me that they just didn't get it, that this entire situation had spiraled out of control because of my stubbornness. That all of this could have been avoided if I had just been reasonable instead of prioritizing a dog over my own sister and her child. The word dog fell from his lips like it was something dirty, something shameful, as if Max wasn't a living, breathing part of my life but a mere object I had refused to put away out of sheer spite. I exhaled slowly, willing myself to keep calm. I had already been through every variation of this argument, every accusation, every attempt to twist reality into a version where I was the villain. I reminded them that Max was my family. That he lived with me, that he had done nothing wrong, that I had already compromised for my sister. I told them that I had respected her boundaries, keeping him out of the nursery, trying to be considerate, and that she had refused to respect mine in return. My sister let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head like she couldn't believe I was still standing my ground. She told me I was selfish. That I was putting an animal before her and her helpless child. That I was the one refusing to make even the smallest sacrifice to help my own blood. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't about Max. This was about control. She wasn't mad that I had chosen my dog over her. She was mad that I hadn't let her dictate the terms of my own home. She was mad that I hadn't bent to her will, that I had drawn a line she couldn't erase, that she had lost. I pushed back my chair and stood, the weight that had been pressing on me for weeks suddenly lifting. I looked at her, at my parents, at the whole ridiculous, staged setup of this dinner, and I realized I was done. Really done. I told her I loved her, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. I reminded her, one last time, that I had given her a safe place to stay, that I had been willing to make room for her and the baby, that I had never asked for anything unreasonable. And I told her the truth, that she had chosen to leave because she couldn't stand that she wasn't the one calling the shots. That was her choice. Not mine. My mother burst into tears then, the kind of dramatic, open-wound sobbing meant to make me second-guess myself. My father shook his head, muttering something about disappointment, about how he had expected better from me. My sister just sat there, silent at first, then glaring, her lips curling into something bitter as she spat out that she hoped I enjoyed being alone with my dog. Update 4. A week passed in complete silence. After the dinner, after the guilt, after the storm of manipulation had finally lost momentum, everything just stopped. No calls, no texts, no sudden, unwanted visits. It was as if my family had finally accepted my decision, or at least realized that I wasn't going to be broken down by their pressure. For the first time in weeks, my house felt peaceful again. No tension hanging in the air, no constant second-guessing, no waiting for the next emotional ambush. Just me and Max, living the way we always had, without someone treating him like a disease that needed to be eradicated. I settled back into my routine, went back to enjoying my space, let the weight of the past few months fade into the background. And then she called. Her name flashed across my screen, and for a split second, I considered letting it ring. I had ignored all of her previous attempts at messaging me, and I knew that whatever she had to say wasn't going to be some heartfelt apology. But curiosity won out, and I answered, already bracing myself for whatever guilt-laced monologue she had prepared. But there was no guilt this time. No sadness. No lingering sense of betrayal in her voice. She was giddy. Triumphant. The moment she started speaking, it was clear, she wasn't calling to fight. She was calling to gloat. Our parents had caved. They had finally done what she had wanted all along. They had paid for her to get an apartment of her own. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't some high-end luxury space, but it was hers, completely covered by their money. She had won, or at least, that's how she saw it. No more relying on friends, no more crashing in places where she wasn't truly welcome. Now she had a place of her own, a place where she could do whatever she wanted, bring over whoever she wanted, live by her rules without having to listen to me. She emphasized that last part, like it was some final victory, like she had freed herself from the oppressive weight of my ridiculous boundaries. She went on about how finally she had the freedom she deserved, how finally she didn't have to put up with restrictions, how finally she could live the way she wanted without having to deal with someone controlling her environment. She framed it like she had broken free from something suffocating, like I had been the one dictating her life rather than the other way around. But the thing was, I didn't care. I didn't feel the sting of her words, the sharpness she had laced into them in an attempt to get a rise out of me. I didn't feel anger, or resentment, or some deep sense of injustice that she had managed to manipulate our parents into giving her exactly what she wanted. If anything, all I felt was a sense of detachment, of utter indifference. Because at the end of the day, she had always been going to get what she wanted. It had never really been about me, or Max, or anything else besides control. She had thrown a tantrum, and they had rewarded it. That was always going to happen. She wasn't gloating because she wanted to share her happiness. She was gloating because she wanted me to feel like I had lost. She wanted me to regret not giving in sooner, to sit there and stew in the thought that I could have avoided all the conflict if I had just bent to her demands. She wanted me to feel like the stubborn fool who had made things harder than they needed to be. But all I felt was relief. I congratulated her in the most neutral, detached way possible, and I could tell she didn't like that. The victory wasn't as sweet if I didn't care. She wanted me to be bitter, to be resentful, to feel like I had been outmaneuvered in some grand game. But I wasn't playing. I had never been playing. She made a few more attempts to get under my skin, throwing in comments about how she was so much happier now, about how she loved not having to listen to anyone, about how much better her life was without my rules looming over her. But none of it landed, because none of it mattered. I had peace. I had my home back. I had Max curled up beside me, happy and safe, without someone treating him like a filthy intruder in his own space. I had everything I needed, and I no longer had to deal with the suffocating weight of my sister's presence, of her demands, of the way she acted like her needs should always come first. She finally hung up, and I could almost hear the frustration in her silence, the way she had wanted me to react but hadn't gotten the satisfaction she was looking for. She had thought she won. But the truth was, I had already won the moment she left.